Welcome, revelers. This is RVL, right versus left. The left is evil. I'm Rob B, and with me, as always,
and I'm Brad Lee,
and I'm Brian G.
And we're here. We're talking about the things that the left is trying to do in this country. We want to make sure that everything's out there and you get a perspective from normal people, so we can make sure that everybody sees that the left is evil.
Evil.
All right, so today we're going to be discussing a topic that's near and dear to all three of us, and that would be the Second Amendment.
Two-way.
So, honestly, I think one of the big issues with the Second Amendment is, like with much of the Constitution, people don't know what it actually says. So
yeah, you're right. There's people that misconstrued it completely. They're like, "Oh, well, it's all about a well-guarded militia." I'm like, you're forgetting some commas in there, big guy.
Yeah, it's only one part.
Well, and then there are actually two different versions because New York and New Jersey and Maryland, the versions that they ratified did have different commas, but I don't think it really matters. So the actual wording is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So
it's a well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Correct. Now, what is a militia?
A citizen army.
Correct. Which has nothing to do with the government.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's there to stand up to the government when they become tyrannical.
Well, I mean, even if you don't get into that, a militia is a citizen's armed force.
Just like Florida has.
In the Revolutionary War, militias were called for. They were given the general direction of the main command, and they were regulated and supplied by the what became the Continental Army, but they were not bodies of the U.S. military. So I make that point because a lot of people try and say that the National Guard is our well-regulated militia. It does not say that there should be one militia. It does not say who should be in charge of the militia, but a militia by definition is a citizen force, and the National Guard is a government force controlled by the states.
Well, and you have to remember, many of the founding fathers did not like the idea of a standing army. They felt that the army gave the federal government too much power. In fact, James Madison argued that the state governments with the people on their side would be more than adequate to counterbalance a federally controlled regular army, even when fully equipped with the resources of the country. Basically saying that he was fighting for a federal standing army, but he felt that by the people being armed, that they could stand up against the army if they needed to.
Yeah. So, and some of the arguments that are made is that they didn't have machine guns, which were invented in the 1600s. So they did have machine guns. That they didn't have cannons. Well, beg to differ. Most of the cannons used in the Revolutionary War were owned by the citizens, not by a standing army that didn't exist before the outset of the Revolutionary War. We wouldn't have had those cannons if it hadn't been for people owning their own private cannons. Basically, when the Second Amendment was written, the individual people had the exact same arms and equipment as the United States government. And so when they put on there, it shall not be infringed. That means it should not be reduced in any way, shape, or form.
Well, and at the time they argued that the citizens should be armed with the same equipment that the federally standing army has. I know they didn't have nuclear weapons at the time, and they didn't have jets, but I mean,
Right, but
you
that's
don't
why
need that to stand up against the army either. Just look at Ukraine or any other number of examples.
Afghanistan, Iraq. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So,
but that's why the founding fathers said to keep and bear arms, because they knew at the time that the weapons were evolving and it wasn't going to be just muskets and shit. That's why it was arms and not muskets.
So, and then I'd like to point out that, of course, the first introduction of restrictions on the arms that you could bear were in the 30s under a Democrat.
Yes.
So Democrats were always pushing this. So first was the National Firearms Act, 1934. It mandated registration. Okay, that's not, to me, that's not restriction. I'm okay with registration. Not that the government necessarily needs to know what you own, but it did require for like explosive ordnance, heavy weapons, and machine guns to be registered. Okay, in the interest of national security, if we're invaded, it would behoove the government to know who has these weapons so they can coordinate a response. So I'm okay with the registration in that effect. But then, of course, it followed 4 years later by the Federal Firearms Act, where now they start restricting how gun manufacturers and business selling firearms are selling them. And this is the first restriction of people owning weapons, which is convicted felons. And of course, I point back to the 2A. It did not say shall not infringe, except in these cases. It literally says it cannot be infringed.
Well,
because again, many of the people that fought in our Revolutionary War were convicted felons.
Right.
So, and then of course, you get to 1968, and they
1886 is when the first Supreme Court had even anything to do with the Second Amendment, which was Presser versus Illinois.
Yeah.
So,
which was an amendment prevented the states from prohibiting the people from keeping and bearing arms, so as to deprive the United States of the rightful resource for maintaining the public security.
Now, in 68, that's when they started going after your access to guns with the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 68 and the Gun Control Act of 68, prohibiting interstate trade in handguns, increased the minimum age to 21 for handguns, and then restricted the interstate trade of handguns. And that was so the Democratic controlled states could even further clamp down because, again, the Second Amendment says Congress can't enact any laws to infringe upon it. But as with Roe v. Wade, it does not say anything about the states. And if it is not in the Constitution says it refers to the states. So the states do have some degree of control over what they allow in their state, other than the fact that people do have a right to keep and bear arms. The individual states do have the right to restrict it. They just can't take away access. Right. But they started in 34 taking away access. So they've already violated the Second Amendment at a federal level. So I'd say so far we're at every law up to 1968 should be completely struck down because they have a prohibition of any kind on sales of firearms. Do you guys agree?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Firearm Owners Protection Act, that's where they prohibited the sale of automatic firearms manufactured for civilians. So that was 1986. 1988, the Undetectable Firearms Act. That That's where they mandated that there has to be at least 3.7 ounces of metal content in a gun, so it'll go off on a metal detector. So they enacted the Gun-Free Zones Act in 1990, which now made our schools unprotected.
Yeah.
And you notice that's when school shootings started rising, is after 1990.
Well, yeah.
You disarm the teachers, and all of a sudden, everybody's bringing guns. So,
But even still in the 90s, kids were still having rifles and shotguns in the backs of their trucks so that they could go hunting after
Oh yeah,
school.
I used to go to school and there'd be rifles in the back of my buddy's truck, in the window, back in the 90s. We never had a problem with it.
That brings me to a story up in Priest Lake, Idaho. There was a California teacher came up, and of course, it's a small town, hunting town, like out in the middle of nowhere in BFE, Idaho. And all the kids had guns in the backs of their trucks. And this teacher had moved up from California and called the cops and said that she thought there was going to be a school shooting because all these kids had a bunch of mean-looking guns in the back of their trucks. And the cops are like, "What are you talking about? This is North Idaho. This happens all the time. They go hunting." My father-in-law actually went to that call, and he was like, "You guys are you're stupid. This is completely normal. Nothing is they've been doing this for years. Why are you calling us? You're wasting our time."
So, now with the Brady bill, that's where they began requiring the background checks for handguns. You guys know what's absolutely ridiculous for that, right? John Hinckley did not have a criminal record. John Hinckley still does not have a criminal record. He was found not guilty not guilty by reason of insanity. He does not have a criminal record. He would pass a background check now.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of these criminals aren't getting their guns legally. That's why they call them criminals.
Yeah, and I mean, even that aside, the law that was passed based on the attempted assassination of Reagan, where Brady was injured, puts into place a restriction that's not allowed by the Second Amendment that wouldn't have actually prevented the act, which I think can go on with school shootings. Like it demonstrates that the goal is restriction, not actually reduction of the crime. Because from the very first, where the most sweeping restriction that was put in place with the background checks for the sale of handguns, with the Brady bill, would not have prevented the crime that it was brought up in response to. So it's politicians paying politics, not actually
taking advantage of the situation, taking care of the advantage of the situation to get what they want.
And of course, if you guys remember back, a lot of people forget because of how much Reagan was able to get. He did have a Democratic Congress.
Yeah.
And they passed the Brady bill in a veto-proof majority.
Yeah.
So the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act gave law enforcement officers the right to conceal carry in all jurisdictions, regardless of state or local laws. So that was an opening.
Yeah. How about in DC going up to 2003, where they're basically requiring all firearms to be inoperable even inside somebody's home?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And then the 6 DC residents that challenged the DC law. Let's see, which the Supreme Court found that was unconstitutional to require firearms to be inoperable inside a home, and it even restricted the openly or concealed carry in the house, which they also found unconstitutional in DC.
So here's something that I found interesting. 44 states have provisions in their state constitution similar to the Second Amendment that protects the right to keep and bear arms. The exceptions are California, Iowa, Maryland, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, and I feel like I'm missing one. So even Illinois has the Second Amendment in their state constitution, and yet they're one of the most restrictive jurisdictions in the country,
and have one of the highest gun crime rates.
Yeah, I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking like as far as the percentage of gun crimes, the only ones missing off this list from the highest levels are Louisiana and Pennsylvania. Other than that, California, New Jersey, New York, Maryland, they have some of the highest per capita crime rates. In Minnesota, they have some of the highest per capita crime rates in the country.
Oh yeah,
I kind of see that as a direct correlation personally.
Crime rates under firearms?
No. So the crime rates, violent crime rates in the states that don't have state Second Amendment and guarantees tend to be high. The exception being Ohio or Iowa doesn't have one, and their per capita crime rate is not particularly high. And yeah, the rest of them are all very high. So I'm actually looking at a map. It's a color-coded map, and it's kind of funny looking at it because it's got the household firearm ownership rate. So, and it's actually kind of surprising to me. So, the states with 60% or more of households owning firearms are Wyoming, Montana, and West Virginia. So, followed up are actually Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama, looks like Missouri. Yep. And Tennessee and Vermont. Next up, then you get the basket of like Texas, basically all the Southwest states fall in that area. Then Washington State, and then pretty much the rest of the Midwest except for Illinois. Lowest gun ownership, Massachusetts and New Jersey. Less than 10% of households have guns.
Yeah, I didn't know very many people in Alaska that did not own a gun, and it was usually very liberal.
Yeah, it rates 50 to 60%, which actually, if you look at the representation in Congress, even though this like hinky ass law that they have with their, we could do a whole discussion on the unconstitutionality and the direct affront to democracy of this ranked choice voting. But
I hate ranked choice.
Yeah, it's basically your guy sucks, can't win, so we're gonna make it so as long as they're like in the top 5 choices of somebody, they end up winning. Like it's so.
Well, it allows a lot of liberals to win in Alaska, which would not have won.
Yeah, I don't think that's representative. I think that's ridiculous.
Oh, are you guys talking about the voting system in Alaska?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
where
just
if this
Alaska,
guy don't win, I choose this guy.
Yeah, so, I don't like this other guy. This guy's my second choice. So if the first choice doesn't win, my vote automatically goes to the second choice.
Right. That's stupid.
So the actual rankings, the top 5 for most households. This is households, not guns, but the actual most households with guns. 45 million American households have at least one firearm. The top 5 are Montana at 65%, Wyoming at 60%, West Virginia at 60%, Idaho at 57%, and Alaska with 57%. Do you hear about a lot of crime in those states?
No, but I think Idaho, that's a low estimate.
So, well, I mean, it's based on firearm registrations and data for the households. So
Alaska in the past,
the bottom
Alaska
5,
in the past, I would have said the crime rate was low, but Anchorage has been going skyrocketing. Has become more and more liberal, and and really taken a lot of those laws of ignore the little crimes so the cops can focus on the big crimes, which
That's
opened
like
up the door for
deterring
the
the
big
criminals.
crimes. Yeah, which directly went to my uncle being murdered, shot in the gut. So I mean, yeah, I have issues with some of those laws, which most of us acquaint to one of the reasons he was murdered. So
yeah. So the bottom five are New Jersey with 8.9%, Massachusetts with 9%, Hawaii with 9.1%, Rhode Island with 13%, and New York with 14.5%. So, but I want to look at actual numbers of guns by state. What do you guys think is the highest and lowest?
What do you mean by state?
Yeah.
the highest?
And I would say Wyoming
You
is
think
probably
Illinois is
the
the lowest?
No, I think
So,
Illinois is the highest.
For number of guns?
Oh no, yeah, flip flop it.
Yeah. So the lowest is actually Rhode Island with 4,887 guns in the whole state.
How big is Rhode Island? What's the population?
I think maybe 1 million people.
Higher population in Alaska, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's like twice the population of Alaska and about the size of the Anchorage Municipal District.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
Anchorage has 300 and
Yeah.
some thousand, which is almost double which is basically the size of the rest of the state.
Now, here's what's surprising. Now, there's a population offset, obviously. The most guns, and these are registered weapons, so if there's unregistered weapons, it doesn't count that, obviously, which would kind of distort Illinois. Texas, 1 million. Florida, 500,000. Virginia, 423,000. California, 406,000. But considering their population, that's actually not very much per person.
No, it's very small.
And a whole lot of
what all guns are required to be registered though? Even a rifle.
Everything.
That's interesting.
So, and then the lowest, of course, are Rhode Island, Delaware, Hawaii, Vermont, Maine, and surprisingly, Alaska, but that's just because of the low population. But there's 28,000 for a state with a population of 700,000. So that's actually a lot lower than I would have thought it was. Of course,
that's
Alaska,
just registered guns.
In Alaska, you don't have to register rifles anyway.
Well,
What's the leading?
The state and the federal government only knows about 1/4 of the guns my family owns. So
right.
That's
well, I mean,
regular up there.
Yeah, rifles don't have to be registered, and then up until a couple years ago, you didn't have to register private sales.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So those guns wouldn't have been registered. The person who originally owned them might have passed away, and they were inherited and whatnot. Stuff like that. So that
which
ends
they're
up being a
calling
whole
the
lot of
gun show loop.
What's that, Brad?
Which they're calling the gun show loophole.
Yeah, the gun show.
Gun show loophole BS.
You mean
I've been to gun shows.
That's what they're trying to
Well,
say.
I've been to gun shows and I couldn't take my gun home from the gun show. They had to do background checks, and then I had to go pick up the gun a week later.
Right. Yeah, I got my gun from a pawn shop, and I was like, "Oh, you mean I can't?" I was told by President Biden that I could just walk in and walk out with a gun. You mean it's not that easy? They're like, yeah, he's full of shit."
Yeah, the guns I bought myself were from gun shows, and I literally bought the gun. Okay, you can pick it up in a week. We have to run your background checks, and we'll let you know when it's ready for pickup.
Right, and that was the same way at the pawn shop too.
Yeah,
when I bought my Ruger. They said it usually takes about 3 days. It took literally a week. I was like, well. They're like, well, if you don't hear anything by next Friday, just come in with the money and pick it up. And that's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
So people just think that it's so easy to go in and get a gun, but it's not as easy as people think.
Okay, my
No,
30-06, I bought it like 6 years ago. I walked in, bought it, and walked out.
Yeah, that was the 30-06. That's a rifle.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was pretty easy. My 9mm, yeah, I went back and picked it up like a week and a half later. I could have picked it up after a week, but I just didn't have time. So it ended up being a week and a half later. I went and picked it up.
Right, but you still had to wait a significant amount of time because of the background check.
Yeah, and then
even the rifles I bought, I had to wait a week to get.
Yeah, my shotgun, I had to wait like 5 days, and they called me and said my background check came back.
That's crazy. You shouldn't have to do all that for
a
my
rifle 30-06
or a shotgun.
Well, my 30-06, I had to wait a week to get, and I bought that at the gun show.
Mm-hmm. See, I don't think there should be a background check for. Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't think. I honestly, I don't think there should be a background check for rifles or shotgun. I mean, you don't have to get a background check for a knife, right? And there was this mass stabbing situation up in Canada, and they pretty much said they were going to abolish the sale of handguns. So,
what's that got with stabbings? Nothing.
Yeah, nothing. You can still go and buy a knife. I mean, are they going to ban assault knives now? So you can't. I mean, you already can't buy switchblades, right?
Murder victims by types of weapons. So there were 12,000 by gun, almost 13,000. 1,739 by knives. So I guess we better start banning assault knives.
Mm-hmm.
983 by stuff not specified. 983. So that could be like ropes,
hands,
yeah.
golf clubs, hammers,
yeah,
stickles.
Brad, sorry, your hands are lethal. We're gonna have to ban them.
No, so
cut them off.
This is interesting because they keep saying how unarmed people aren't dangerous. 662 murders were committed with personal body parts, hands.
Oh, so I choked this woman to death with my penis.
Rob.
Hey. Anyway,
I told her it wasn't a donkey show.
So now it's funny that they're so after assault weapons, which are rifles. They're classified as rifles. Now here's what's funny: the total number of murders by guns, 13,000. By rifles, 455. So
okay,
rifles,
now wait a minute. Okay, of those 13,000,
likely to be used in a murder than knives.
Okay, but of those 13,000, how many were actually murders and not suicides?
Or accidental shootings.
These murder statistics.
Okay, because I noticed from 1968, before 1968, is 6.3 million in suicides, and at the same time, it was 5.2 in murder. And then it goes all the way up. The suicide is the leading cause of gun deaths.
Yes.
Over murders.
Yes, definitely.
And then it starts to spike up at about 2019 to 2020, which I wonder what that's from.
Oh, these are some. Here's some more interesting statistics. So 203
from Pew Research Center.
Shotgun. So shotguns aren't really used for murder. 113 by narcotics, so like forced overdoses. Yeah. 106 by fire, like setting a motherfucker on fire.
Jeez.
Strangulation and asphyxiation is 129.
Asphyxiation.
Now,
like, does that include autoerotic?
Now, here's the thing. So I said rifles, like the AR, always going after. 393 by clubs and hammers. Yeah. So we better start rating these construction workers and registering their assault hammers.
Yeah. How many by nail guns?
That's actually other guns. So 130.
Oh, okay. I see.
Well, by the left's definition of assault weapon, the hammer and stuff would be considered an assault weapon.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Well, the left. That's the thing, though, is the left has not come up with a specific definition for an assault weapon.
bro,
Yeah,
like
if it looks scary, then it must be an assault weapon.
bro, 4 people got blown up.
Potato gun?
How bad you gotta hate somebody that you literally blow them up. And then 5 drowning. Okay, that's like a really long seated personal grudge that you actually go through the effort of holding them underwater to drown them.
Well, you Rob, you know, that might be the way I end up taking you out.
No, I have to wonder. So I'm assuming the 16 poisoning murders were all husbands getting murdered by their wives.
Well, we know of one.
The five drownings. I just wonder how many of those were. Oh no, you know what? I bet you for 2020 those were kids drowned by their mothers.
Oh, I was gonna say, was that Hillary Clinton's victims?
Oh, you mean her friends that committed suicide? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we're not trying to get We're not trying to get any of the right versus left members killed by. I mean, committing suicide by Clinton. That's one of my T-shirts, by the way. If I die, I'm not suicidal. No, in case I'm Clinton, I'm not suicidal. I'm just conservative.
Yeah.
Juicy Smollier. I'm not suicidal.
Yeah, just in case I'm not suicidal. Yeah, I think if you're a conservative and you get arrested, you need to make sure to make a public statement right away. I'm not suicidal. I just hate Clintons.
Yeah. And it's sounding like she might be thinking about running in 2024.
God, I hope so.
They say she's positioning herself to be the moderate.
Yeah.
It didn't work for her the first time.
Now that's funny. They're saying that Trump mishandling classified information disqualifies him from running for president, and yet the woman with the most publicized mishandling of
classified information
is looking at
the
Democratic
Party.
Party.
No, just ask her. She's a reliable source. The FBI said that there was no classified information,
and the one we know the information was stolen from.
Mm-hmm. By her own freaking FBI guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I think is pretty clear is that, yes, there's a lot of murders by gun, but there's a lot of murders by other means. And if you took away guns, you would still have a lot of murders.
How many people own fully automatic firearms in the United States?
Very, very, very few.
Very few.
Like
because there's a specific requirement that you have to get it.
Oh yeah.
I'm pulling it up right now. What qualifies as an automatic weapon? An automatic weapon, which often is called a machine gun, is defined by federal law as a firearm that fires more than one bullet with each pull of the trigger. For example, all non-automatic weapons only fire one bullet with each pull of the trigger, which would be semi-automatic. Here are the requirements for owning a machine gun or an automatic weapon in the United States. It must not be classified as a prohibited person.
So
you must.
Australia banned guns, right?
Oh yeah,
and yet
they did the whole buyback thing.
So yet they had 6,427 armed robberies. So that I find that interesting.
Well, what is? Yeah, you got to narrow down the because I mean you could be armed with a knife, right?
Homicides
robbery.
in Australia, 2004 to 2005 by weapons type. Here we go.
I want to get a machine gun now.
And even the Australians who supported the banning of the guns in Australia says that it wouldn't work in the U.S. The U.S. is a totally different situation.
Yeah,
it's too ingrained in our society.
We're not a prison colony.
It's too ingrained in our society.
You know what I'm finding really funny? It's actually really hard to pull up the gun statistics in
Oh,
Australia.
yeah. You're gonna have to dig. You're gonna have to go. You're probably gonna have to get off of Google or whatever search engine you use, and then go to like,
duck go.
yeah.
Okay, so firearm
No,
related
it's
injuries
sad, but
were
that's true because Google will suppress
2,300.
that.
Okay, so I got the firearm injuries. 2,390 people recorded injuries by firearm. 849 the people were caused by assault. 797 by intentional self-harm. So 506
Intentional
by
self-harm.
accidents.
Did
Yeah,
you just say intentional self? What? You couldn't use the word suicide
but they might not
or
have died.
attempted? Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's 1.8 incidents per 100,000 population. How does that compare to some of the U.S. cities?
Well, shoot, that's a good question. Oh wait. Oh, what was it that you were looking for, Rob?
The rate per 100,000 of firearm injuries in the U.S. I just wonder how much higher we are than a country that completely banned guns.
Well, and then you look at
That's a
3D
state's
printing, which
firearm.
makes it that much harder.
So, and I
What
think,
about that guy in New York who just got a $21,000 or $41,000 from the city of New York for his upper and lower assemblies that he sold to Kathy Hochul or the stupid fucking district attorney over there?
I'm so glad that I put our content as explicit so we can cuss away.
Well, that's good.
That's good for you too.
The listeners will notice that Brian's a pansy bitch, so he never cusses.
Oh yes, that's the exact reason.
Oh, sorry,
it's not just because I'm a strong Christian that doesn't believe that cursing really
I
accomplishes
mispronounced
anything.
that. He's not a. It's not pronounced pussy bitch. It's pronounced Catholic.
Oh, come on,
Catholic. I just don't think that cursing really accomplishes anything. So it does. It never really did much to me.
He's got a better vocabulary than the rest of us little fucks.
Well, actually, I will point out that the statistics say that people that swear more tend to have higher IQs. So.
Oh yeah, whatever. Oh boy.
It's okay. We call Brian double digits.
It's getting deep here, man. I need to pull out my snorkel and start swimming a little here.
It's okay. Brian's mom always said he was special.
Oh yes.
Okay, this coming from the guy who said fudge last freaking show.
Yeah, I know.
No, it wasn't even fudge; it was fudge in.
And the one who likes to curse and he says fudge.
That would be the last freaking show, Brad. Okay.
Yeah, because I use the word freaking. Okay,
you guys are your freaking rifles.
Okay, so you got the statistic, Brad?
There were 5 fast facts for the firearm. In 2020, there was 45,222 gun deaths in the U.S. How many did you say there were?
Well, let's see. So
this is coming from the.
Hold on. So how many was?
45,000.
45,000 divided by 330 million.
So that's like 0.04.
0.00014. Yeah.
Well, that's almost sounded like pi.
Now, but what about gun injuries? Because you did specifically gun deaths.
Yeah, well, that's what I could find right there. I'll have to.
So we'll do. Okay, gun injuries. U.S.
cities rate per 100,000 firearm injuries.
Deaths. Injury facts. It's funny they go straight to deaths and you can't find the injuries.
Yeah, that's all. I got the bottom one is accidental deaths, suicides, and violent crime. But there's like 100 stinking pages of Firearm violence, California's gun safety policies save lives.
Yeah, right. I would say it does the opposite.
Oh, yes, it does.
So is my math like really, really bad here? They say 45,222 deaths is 13.7 times per 100,000. Okay. So if you take, so 330 million, right, is the population, not counting the 40 million illegal immigrants that don't get counted. I mean,
Oh, here we go. I got gun deaths by country 2022 World Population Review. Brazil is got the highest, which is at total deaths by guns is 49,437, which would be a death rate per 100K 22.96. United States is right below that at 37,040 deaths, and the death rate per 100K is 10.95. How do you get 10.95? What's 0.95 of a person? Is that like somebody in a wheelchair?
it's an average bad.
Is that a paraplegic? What?
Jeez.
We got Christopher Reeves here. He's the 0.95.
Okay, so let's see here. Estimate of civilian firearms per 100 person. The United States, 120 firearms per 100 people. So that's 1.2 guns per person. Yes, Brad, that means just a cylinder for some people. The Falkland Islands, 62. Yemen, 52. New Caledonia, 42. Serbia, 39. Montenegro, 39. Canada, 34. Uruguay, 34. Cyprus, 34. Finland, 32. Lebanon, 31. Iceland, 31. I'm surprised that
this isn't even
these
making
countries
sense.
aren't way higher. Like Sweden, they require you to maintain a firearm. So how do they not have one?
Yeah, every household has to have a operating firearm in the house, and they have to be trained and know how to use it.
Oh, that's probably because they have a high percentage of their population underage. That would be my guess. Or above the age that they're required to maintain.
This doesn't even make any sense, dude. It's saying, listen, dude. Okay, so this is saying that Australia has 0. This is
Says Australia had 0 guns?
Yeah, it has 0 death rate by guns.
Which I know for a fact is not accurate.
Yeah, it can't be. It's worldpopulationreview.com.
It's how they count and maintain the record. So you never get an actual accurate count for the world. So it's hard to tell how high we are compared to the rest of the world because we count it totally different. Silence.
No, so I'm looking, and here's some actual numbers. So what year did Australia ban guns?
Oh, it was like 93, 94.
Okay, so it is going down because in 90 it was 595, 618, and 91. You fast forward a bit. The latest statistic I can find is 2011 at 232, but that would be 20 years after the guns were banned, and they're still having 200 gun deaths per year.
Was that right when they banned the weapons?
I know it's like 20 or 30 years.
No, I know. I'm just wondering if my
statement
was correct.
Now, let's see. So guns cause murder, right?
No,
Murders.
people murder. Guns. Look,
no.
My gun is still my gun is still sitting in its safe where it has been since the last time I fired it, and it hasn't killed one motherfucker. I can tell you that.
It hasn't killed you yet.
Nope, it hasn't killed my wife or kids either.
I love how when the statistics aren't particularly helpful, they change the statistic.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So in Australia, the total number of homicides was 221 in 2020. Funny, that's absolutely no different than it was under 10 years ago. And most of them were committed by guns.
It was 96 apparently when they did that. But let me make sure. Yeah, 1996 to 97. According to OJP.gov.
But 2021, because they're doing the same woke bullshit, 370 murder victims in 2021. But guns are illegal. Why is it going up?
3D printers. Come on.
Yeah. That's a real thing. They're really crappy guns, but they're guns.
Yeah.
So Australia's 1996 National Firearms Agreement banned several types of firearms and resulted in the government buying hundreds of thousands of the banned weapons from their owners. Studies examining the effect of removing so many weapons from the community have found that homicides, suicides, and mass shootings were less common after the NFA was implemented, although such incidents were declining prior to 96. The strongest evidence is consistent with the claim that the NFA caused reductions in firearm suicides, mass shootings, and female homicide victimization. However, there is also evidence that raises questions about whether, or at least firearm suicide, those changes can be attributed to the NFA or to other factors that influenced rates of these outcomes around the time the NFA was implemented.
Hey, Brad, the way you changed your inflection when you were talking about female homicide rates, it makes it sound like you think killing a bitch is funny.
I don't understand why they had to single out female homicide.
Well, because, of course, male toxic masculinity, duh.
Oh, get out of here. Oh, yeah, because men are the only ones that own firearms.
Yeah, I wonder how many women kill people.
But that's funny because it doesn't say that they banned firearms all around.
No, they didn't. Guns are still legal there.
So guns are still legal there. It's just certain.
And the funny thing is, criminals still have guns because apparently criminals don't exactly obey some laws and not others. It's weird.
What, they don't register their guns and let the government know they have them, and then they don't just turn them in when the government says, "Can you please turn in all your guns?"
Yeah, it's funny like that. So, and then they also, of course, don't talk a lot about the fact that they did do a forced confiscation, where they went in and raided people who did not voluntarily take part in the voluntary program. So then they just went and said, "Okay, ours now."
Yeah, they're saying that. A ban on importation, ownership, sale, resale, transfer, possession, manufacture, or use of all self-loading center rifles, all self-loading and pump-action shotguns, and all self-loading rimfire rifles. Some exemptions allowable to primary producers and clay target shooters.
Hey, that's perfect because I've never had a gun loaded, so all guns are legal.
Yeah.
Hey, Rob, you mean they raided houses kind of like they did during the pandemic for anyone who said that who talked against what the government was trying to say?
Yeah, and like they do if you happen to be a conservative that supports Trump, or if you pray in front of an abortion clinic and try and get people not to murder babies.
And someone pushes your kid down and you beat the fuck out of them.
I'm just saying, in Australia, you see all those videos of cops raiding houses of people that have talked against what the government was trying to say, saying, you shouldn't have to take the vaccine, that masks don't work very well, that, just all this different stuff that the government was saying, no, that's not right. And so they raided people's houses that spoke up against it publicly.
So I wonder if I create like an autocannon that automatically targets and shoots and just plant it on the border, if I never actually pulled the trigger, am I responsible for killing the illegal immigrants trying to sneak into the country?
Jeez.
I'm just thinking maybe it's time to get video gamey down there. Anyway.
Oh boy.
We're off the rails as usual.
Off the rails. So, off the rails.
Now that we actually have a constitutional respecting Supreme Court, Although I do have concerns that Antonin Scalia, when he was leading the court, he said that Second Amendment was not absolute. I have a concern about the saying that amendments aren't absolute, because then that means like, oh, so the guarantee of freedom and the prohibition on slavery, that shouldn't be absolute either, right? And clearly they don't think free speech is absolute. So what other rights are not absolute?
The woman's right to vote.
A child's right to live.
Well, obviously you don't have the freedom of religion. You don't have the freedom of speech. You don't have the freedom of assembly. And when can you ever petition the government? Apparently you don't have the right to trial by jury.
Just look at the January 6 guys who've been in jail for over a year.
Yeah, or a speedy trial. Which is funny because I just got a subpoena or a summons for jury duty.
So I guess we'll all have the federal government troops in our houses soon.
You know, it's funny that according to Biden and the federal government, it doesn't matter if you have guns, because there's no way you could stand up to an army. But yet these people that didn't have any guns that raided the Capitol on January 6th was inciting to take over the government. But why were they worried about it?
That was a coup.
Yeah. Why were they worried about it? Because they didn't have nuclear bombs, they didn't have jets, they didn't have tanks.
Yeah, I always thought that was an interesting contradiction.
Get this. That was an unarmed insurrection.
Yeah. And yet, so apparently
that's kind of a contradictory in terms.
So which one is it? Is the Second Amendment ridiculous because you can't fight F-16s with rifles, or is or is it that unarmed people can overthrow the government in a coup?
Yeah, and most of them aren't even violent.
What's going on, man?
Most of them just followed the crowd in, and we're being peaceful.
Hey, that Joe Biden joining us on the call.
Come here,
well, he's talking clearer than Biden does most of the time. What are you talking about?
Joe, stop sniffing little girls.
Stop climbing into the shower with your daughter.
Yeah.
That's not Joe.
That's what her diary said. My father's inappropriate, climbing into the shower and you know. It's like, oh god.
Come on, man.
Okay, so let's go real quick. I want to go through a list of all of the Bill of Rights here, and let's see how many of these are being
challenged.
Well, not challenged, but destroyed. Freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition.
Press has gone a long time ago.
Yeah. So right to keep and bear arms. Yep, 38.
Working on it.
Taking that away.
New York is already there.
Soldiers. Okay, that hasn't happened yet. Number 4, the freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures. Well, let's ask the My Pillow guy about that. Or Trump. The right to due process of law, freedom from self-incrimination. Interesting. Due process of law. Again, January 6 people. I would say that what's the kid's name from Wisconsin?
Rittenhouse.
I'd say he was his right of due process of law was violated, considering he obviously wasn't a threat and was held on $5,000 bail. Yet the dude who intentionally ran over a conservative was out on a $500 bond.
Was it? Is that what 10% of $50,000 is? And that was literally a political. We're talking about the guy that ran over the kid because he thought he was a right-wing extremist. We're not talking about the guy that ran over the people in the parade.
So the Sixth Amendment is the right to accused person, right to a speedy trial and public trial. They sure do try to shut. Have you seen any coverage of these January 6 hearings? Or not the hearings, the trials for the January 6 people? Not that most of them have ever had a trial. So since they've been in jail for a year and a half, that speedy trial's gone.
And now they want Now they want to go to Guantanamo.
You know,
Bay
the whole
because of better conditions.
You know, the whole innocent until you're proven guilty is BS now.
Oh, it has been. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to come up with bail.
Freedom from excessive bail. Rittenhouse, cruel and unusual punishment. January 6th, people. Right by trial of jury in the civil cases. So I think the Seventh Amendment is still enacted because I haven't heard of any cases where a jury trial is denied. Let's see. What are the other rights of the people under the
Bill of Rights?
No, under the Ninth Amendment.
Oh. Let me see.
So, like,
hey, Rob,
I'm just wondering how that's worded because I'm not particularly familiar. The Ninth Amendment was.
Let's see here.
Hey, Rob, let's not forget.
So this was in order to make sure that the federal government didn't try and say that the rights expressed are your only rights.
Hey, let's not forget to talk about red flag laws since we're talking about guns.
Yeah.
Those are just, they're not applied fairly or equally.
So, and then of course the 10th Amendment, that says if it's not in the Constitution, it goes to the states, which the federal government oversteps on a daily basis.
So the Ninth Amendment, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So the Ninth Amendment was James Madison's attempt to ensure that the Bill of Rights was not seen as granting to the people of the United States only the specific rights it addressed. In recent years, some have interpreted it as affirming the existence of such unenumerated rights outside those expressly protected by the Bill of Rights. Don't sound confused, guys.
No, I was actually just looking at the 11th Amendment that seems to say that they can't just arbitrarily apply case law to another case. Because it basically says that judicial power from one case cannot automatically extend to other cases. And yet they use this precedent all the time. So I find that kind of interesting. So, 13th Amendment. Neither slavery or involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime. Hey, so we can stop complaining about prisoners being forced to work for their meals?
Wait, what?
So,
no, wait,
obviously, the federal government doesn't have a problem with that.
They get paid and they get paid pennies, but so they're not slaves. They're being reimbursed.
Well, but they don't have to be reimbursed if it's punishment for a crime.
Right. No, I get that. So, I mean, whatever. Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. We shouldn't be paying for, they should all be out there cleaning up our highways, digging ditches, although I'm not sure that I would want a criminal building a road. I mean, the whole point of the penal system is to rehabilitate them, right? So you want them to be able to do something when they have paid their debt to society.
So, and then the 14th Amendment, that's actually obviously exactly what they're trying to use to disqualify Trump by trying to leak him to the unarmed attempted coup, which, since he was still technically the sitting president, wouldn't that be a coup against himself?
Right.
Anyway, but they're trying to link him to that because that's one of the few things that keeps you from holding a higher office.
There's 12 amendments.
So the 15th Amendment rights of citizens of the United States shall now be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. So that guaranteed the right of slaves to vote. But doesn't that mean that felons shouldn't have their rights to vote denied? Don't they have some like restrictions on their voting?
They do, but they have. I mean, when
I think that depends on the state.
After they've gone, yeah, I think the state has something to do with it too. But generally, if you have no fines and you've done your time and you're off probation and all your debt to society is,
but there is still infringement on that amendment.
I honestly don't know. I'm a little torn on that. I don't think that they should be able to because they've already screwed up.
Well, but then, like, so are we going to start to make it? But that's then again making exceptions to rights guaranteed by the Constitution,
right?
I don't think we should be like carving out exceptions because it's too easy to expand them,
right?
Because then they can say saying Biden's a numbnut is a felony, and then you can't vote because you said Biden's a numbnut.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you were on there before January 6th saying that Biden's a numbnut and shouldn't be president and that he stole the election, well, then you shouldn't be allowed to vote because you committed a felony of misinformation in California. Or, oh, there you go. So they made it a felony, the misinformation in California. So any doctor who gave real statistics about COVID could be convicted under that law and then denied the right to vote.
Right.
So it's just interesting how like all of these amendments are just like under attack, except for, well, so far quartering of troops and
the right to for women to vote.
Yeah, which I still think is funny that generally speaking, women didn't support that. It was actually men that pushed it.
Yeah.
Because they wanted their wives to be able to vote the way they wanted to vote.
Right. And the women didn't want to because they didn't want to have to do jury duty or join the fire brigade at the bucket brigade.
Yeah. So I just think it's interesting. So it's not just the Second Amendment under attack, it's every amendment.
In the draft, and women still get to vote and they don't have to sign up for the draft, which I don't think women should be drafted anyways, but
so, and then I think the main purpose of the Second Amendment, of course, is the ability to resist the government. Now, if you look at, we talked last week about, or we talked a couple times about Ukraine and arming them, but what I do want to point out is they had almost nothing to go against Russia's massive tanks and planes and rocket launchers and stuff. They had very small military. The majority of the slowing down of the troops going towards Kiev, and I'll specifically say that because it can't be denied they got bounced from Kiev. Like, no matter how Russia tries to spin it, like, those troops were on their way to Kiev and they had to leave. Would you agree with that, Brad? I know we have different viewpoints on what's going on in the war, but like, it was very clear they were going for Kiev and they got repelled.
Oh yeah, yeah, they were definitely going for Kiev.
But they got repelled by small arms. So if a small country can repel the army of what was considered to be the second most powerful military in the world, then I think it's obvious that yes, the importance of the United States citizens maintaining their Second Amendment rights so they can repel a tyrannical government or an invading army or an invasion at the bottom of the country is still important.
It's either that or we grossly overestimated Russia's military.
Well, I mean, they've got the equipment. They just don't have the ability to fight the war. I've said that before. Russia has always been horrible at war.
And they don't have the bodies either, I don't think.
Well, I mean, they could. I mean, they've got the population for it if they can get them to fight.
Yeah, if the population's not behind it, wouldn't it behoove the population? Because I know Zelensky's over there saying, hey, if you guys turn yourself in, there will be no consequences, like as if there would be for the Russians getting POWs from the Ukrainians, right? They wouldn't be tortured.
What indicates that the hundreds of thousands of Russians that have fled across the border to get away from the draft?
Exactly. So
So
I don't think
I am a little curious
that
about
Russia
that.
has the willing bodies to do what you think that Russia would do.
Or the people begging their friends to break their arms and legs so they won't be qualified to serve.
Yeah.
So
Well,
wouldn't it be interesting if Russia tries to throw millions of soldiers into Ukraine and they all just walk across the border and like surrender and become Ukrainians, and Ukraine's population doubles because they naturalize a bunch of Russians that cross the border?
That's what the Western propaganda is that's what it seems like. I mean, there's no doubting that there's tons of protests over in Russia, and it's obvious that the people do not, a good majority of the people do not agree with the war. So
yeah, and then like I do actually still have friends over there, and like what they're saying is it's just insane. Everybody's terrified of the government.
Yeah.
Like in Russia, everybody's terrified.
Well, yeah, when you can't speak against the government and you can't speak for the government on any news outlet over there, you get arrested for talking about it at all. Of course, you're going to be afraid. Whether you're speaking ill or good of the government to the media, they're just going to take you.
When I lived there, and this was before all this, when I lived there, this was what, 7 years ago or something like that. Like it was like the common phrase was, Russian is a free country. You can do and say what you want, but we don't talk about Putin. So I always thought that was interesting. And then like I took part in this exercise where it was like 50 questions to develop love. It was a TED Talk. And so the idea behind the meeting was like you can like experience these same questions and like bond and develop even strong friendships just by asking these 50 questions. And there were a bunch of the older guys who remember the Soviet Union that refused to even take part in the exercise because they're like, the government will use this against me. I'm not answering this. In this free and wonderful country.
Which is weird.
In a lot of ways, the U.S. is starting to become that way.
Yeah, they're doing that right now. They just had something like similar to that about whether or not you're a racist. They said that the MAGA Republicans were racist because of this survey that they took. I can't remember what it was, but it was on Steven Crowder, and he was talking about it, and it was like the way that it was worded was just bullshit.
Okay. Well, guys, we're way over an hour, so let's go ahead and do some final conversations. And then at the end here, I'll give you guys a call back.
Same as always.
Yep. So, Brian, what do you have to say to wrap up on the Second Amendment?
Well, the Second Amendment is definitely the right of the individual to bear arms, and that was the intention of the founding fathers from the beginning. Most of them did not like the idea of a standing army, feeling that it gave the federal government too much power, and they felt that by individuals, not militias necessarily, but just individuals who could be called upon to come together, and they even said to bring their own weapons, to bring their own arms with them, to form in a militia to stand against the federal government army if it came to that. And they felt that would be enough to counter the federal standing army. So the Second Amendment 100% applies to individuals in their own home, and the federal government just needs to keep their hands off the guns. Now, I do believe in background checks. I even don't have a problem with them upping the age to 21 for all guns and requiring training. I don't have a problem with somebody knowing how to use a gun, and a lot of people don't get training from their family like I did when I was a kid growing up, and I was taught how to properly handle a gun. So I don't have a problem with training requirement either. But the fact is, we should be allowed to have guns. We have that right, and they shouldn't be touching that right.
Okay, Brad?
I would agree.
Right,
I would
fair.
agree. Can you
Hear me? Test, test. Hello?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
I agree with most of what Brian said. I think that if you keep the handguns uh, at 21 or older, that's fine. I think that for hunting purposes, 16, 15, 16. I was 15, 16 when I was out hunting, but I do believe that you should have to take the hunter's safety and hunter's education course when you're that young, and that entails gun safety and field dressing and tracking and all that good stuff. But you're going to learn gun safety and how to shoot and the responsibilities of handling a firearm. And I think that I mean, back when the Second Amendment was instated, you know, kids even younger than 15 or 16 were actually hunting to help
I was.
to help feed the family. So, I mean, I think that that's a necessity too. And we all have the right to life. So we all have the right to defend ourselves no matter what, regardless of what old blackface Trudeau says. But I do believe that there should definitely be safety. And my drill sergeant, when I was in basic training, said something ridiculously profound. It was, a gun can save your life, and a gun can take your life, and it can do so in more than one way. A gun could save your life by feeding you. It could save your life by defending you. It can take your life by you using it improperly and spending the rest of your life in prison, and you can also be killed by it. So there's a lot of respect that comes along with handling and owning a gun, and it is necessary for a lot of things. You know, I didn't need it. I didn't need a gun for a long time because I mean I just recently purchased my first firearm ever, and I'm glad I did. And I fire it, and every time that I go, even when I go to a shooting range, I'm nervous about it because there's all kinds of things that could go wrong if you mishandle the weapon and don't treat it with the respect that it deserves. So I think that absolutely the Second Amendment is absolute, and it shall not and cannot be infringed upon by the government.
No, Brad, real quick. I've been shooting since I was probably 5 or 6, shooting pellet guns. I was hunting when I was 8 or 9. And I don't think kids should be able to walk into the shop till he's 21 and buy a rifle, but his parents can buy one and he can use those, just personally.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm okay with that.
This restriction of 21 to me is ridiculous because we had 18-year-olds out fighting to defend our country. They're obviously responsible enough to handle a weapon. So to imply that they are not responsible enough in person, again, that comes back to like parenting. And let's teach your kids to be respectful of people, and they were less likely to, like, I don't know, shoot them.
Well, you should be respectful. You should be respectful of guns too. I mean,
you can make exceptions for people that have served in the military because they've had the proper training.
For my final comments on the Second Amendment, I'm actually gonna quote a foreign leader.
Please, not Trudeau.
No, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto.
Oh yes,
said, "I would never invade America. There is a gun behind every blade of grass," and that was a serious consideration for the Soviet Union during their entire Cold War.
Yeah,
that was the purpose of the Second Amendment, and it needs to be maintained that way. However, I think we need a truly conservative government that allows us to actually enact the intention of the Second Amendment. We should have volunteer armies standing at the volunteer militias standing ready at the border, turning back these invaders. And I believe that something has to be done about these federal forces that are now being tyrannical. That was the intention. So I think maybe it's time that some state militias start defending the people of their state when the federal government's coming in by force to violate their rights. That was the purpose of the Second Amendment.
Absolutely.
So, anyways, good show, you guys. We went off the rails as always for a while, but it was kind of interesting to look at some of the gun statistics, and like I don't see a workaround, because there's just like it's kind of an absolute statement that the federal government, like states, they've got more power to do it, except for the fact that 44 states have their own version of the Second Amendment in their state constitutions, which means there are only 6 states in the country that are able to limit guns. And I think we need to get back to absolutism as far as following our Constitution. So, anyways, for the revelers, thanks for listening. Hope the show was interesting. Make sure you follow us so you get notifications whenever we post content. Give us that 5 stars so we stay highly rated. We're still maintaining a 5-star rating, even though we've had some technical difficulties here and there, and occasionally the monetization, we're almost there. So keep listening, keep sharing, help grow our audience. And again, the website will be going up this month, so you guys will be able to communicate with us directly, whether you're a liberal that wants to come on the show and debate points of policy with us, or whether you're a conservative that just wants to join the conversation. We're going to be welcoming everybody. Thanks so much for listening to the show. For me, Brad, and Brian, revelers, you have a great rest of your week. We'll see you this weekend, and we'll have some more rants coming and maybe some more additional content now that I'm finally on vacation.
All right. Have a good night.
Good night, guys.